got Netflix. Let's focus. I don't care whether you've got Netflix, or if you've got Disney Plus, or Hulu, or some combination of these. All of them are filled with movies that make us smile, make us laugh, get us all emotional. These movies, when I talk to my kids, I said, what are some of the first movies you remember seeing when you were younger? And so these are some of the movies they talked about. They gave me a big long list. I tried to pick a few that I hope that you have some connection to. I want to ask this question before we get started. How many of you have seen High School Musical? Vast majority, not everybody. Yeah, I know you've seen it. You've seen it. Don't lie. You've seen it. How many of you have seen Paul Blart Mall Cop? Okay, very good. I'm glad I picked that one. Shark Boy and Lava Girl? This table has a lot of people who say no. Okay, you said yes. Those are yeses, okay. Toy Story, the original Toy Story. Frozen, and Elf. Okay, so I did get a good cross-sampling of movies that most of you have seen. And so, I'm going to pick a few tables to give me their first answer. What movie? I'm going to pick my table first. Which movie was first? Okay, so we have a Toy Story guess up here. Does anyone have anything other than Toy Story? Good start. 1995. So that's number one. I was very surprised that that movie was that old. I graduated high school in 1996. So the fact that this came out while I was still in high school really shocked me. I did not even realize that was the case. But it was, Elizabeth told me, my daughter Elizabeth, she said this was one of the first movies she remembers watching when she was a kid. And so that made me feel good. It's a fun movie, good place to start. Let's go to Elizabeth's table. What movie did you have next in line?
Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Shark Boy and Lava Girl was next. Anybody else have another guess that wasn't Shark Boy and Lava Girl? Yes. Elf was next in this group. Anyone say anything other than those two options? Yes? Oh, you said Elf too? So it's either Elf or Shark Boy and Lava Girl according to the guesses, and it is Elf. Elf was 2003. I will say that Elf is also a family favorite in the Gonzalez house. Is Elf a tradition in anyone else's house on Christmas? Around Christmas? Very good. Okay. Bring it back. Bring it back. Who has not answered? Back table back here. What do you have for third one in line? There we have a Shark Boy and Lava Girl reference. Anything else other than Shark Boy and Lava Girl? Shark Boy and Lava Girl was 2005. 2005. Let's go to my other son Nathan's table. What do you have next? What's number 4? What's back there? High School Musical is number 4. Do we have any other guesses besides High School Musical? You are correct. 2006. 2006. That leaves the last two. What do we say is number 5? Paul Blart Mall Cop is indeed 2009. 2009. I want to tell one quick story about Paul Blart Mall Cop. Because we have a big family, we had a big van. In our big van, we put in cheap TV monitors. And the one movie I enjoy watching or listening to as I'm driving the most, as I'm driving with our family to various places, is Paul Blart. Because it's fun to listen to, even if you can't see the pictures. And so therefore it is one of the family favorites that they like to travel to. 2009. And that leaves us with Frozen, which is the most recent. Still, that's 2013. I thought it was more recent than that. But 2013 is Frozen. And so I want to make one quick point. One quick point. Even just this very simple activity it was interesting to see how the energy kind of got raised as we were talking about movies. Because these movies make us feel good, they make us laugh. There's something funny about them. We have this emotional connection with movies. It's interesting to see how that happens. And the way it all played out here in this conversation was also fun to see from my perspective. With this, I'm going to ask for a volunteer to help me talk a little bit more about movies. I'm going to volunteer Andrew Kreitzer. Come on up here, Andrew Kreitzer. Give him a round of applause. Andrew, have a seat, Andrew. Andrew is a neighbor of ours, lives down the street, spends a lot of time with my family. And I told him if he didn't answer questions, I wasn't going to give him a ride to Edge tonight, so he agreed to participate. So I want to talk about favorite movies for a moment. Andrew volunteered to talk about some of his. Andrew, what is your favorite movie, if you have one? There you go.
I'd probably have to say Rocky III, probably my favorite movie.
Okay. So how many of you have seen Rocky III?
I've never seen it.
Okay, so less than half, but still, I think a lot of the adults have seen it at some point. How would you describe the plot of Rocky III?
Boxing.
He's not wrong. He is not wrong. Who plays Rocky in the Rocky series?
Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone. So this is a movie. This movie series was in the 80s. And what is the main plot of Rocky III?
Boxing.
No. Who is Rocky boxing in Rocky III? Who is his enemy in Rocky III? Is it Clubber Lang?
Clubber Lang.
Clubber Lang is Mr. T, who was also a big 1980s character. What makes that your favorite movie?
I don't know. The boxing's cool.
So we've established that Andrew is a boxing fan, but I also know he's an 80s aficionado of all kinds. He enjoys 80s music. 80s movies do have a special place in his heart. And so there's quite a nice variety of 80s movies on Netflix. But what made Rocky III your favorite? Was there a reason that stood out to you and say, this is what I'm going to talk about tonight?
I don't know. It's just that kind of vibe with all the songs that are played and
Okay.
stuff like that.
Good music. Was it something did your dad tell you, hey, Andrew, we got to watch this movie? Did you watch it with friends? Where did you watch it for the first time?
Yeah, my dad was kind of the one who got me into all the 80s stuff.
Okay. So that's what parents do. Parents push their nostalgia on their kids. And so please know that as you get older, your parents are going to keep pushing things on you because they think it's cool. But there may be a time when you reach Andrew's level of greatness where you start to appreciate what your parents are teaching you about music, movies. Andrew just is fortunate to have reached it at a young age. But you may eventually also realize how cool the stuff is that we talk to you about as parents. It might happen. Andrew, what would you say to make this audience, most of which have never seen Rocky III, how would you convince them to say, you've got to watch this movie?
Yeah, the boxing's cool.
Andrew Kreitzer, everybody. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, you are a good sport. Thank you very much.
What's the plot of boxing? What's the main plot of boxing? What do you think is cool about it? Boxing? Why do you think it's
That actually worked out better than I expected. So, Andrew, thank you very much for that.
and the boxing?
So what we have learned is that movies have a special place in our heart because something about them appeals to us. Andrew said this movie became one of his favorites because it was introduced to him by his father, and he liked the movie, and so it has become something that's important to him. I'm guessing a lot of you have memories of movies like this because you watched them with friends, or maybe you did watch them with family members, or it dates back to something earlier in your childhood that makes you feel good. Talking about movies, especially with somebody who likes the same movies you do, isn't that fun? You can have for those of you who are Marvel fans, how many of you are fans of the Marvel movies? Caitlin Gogler answered some questions with me earlier at the 4:30 Edge night, and she talked about the Marvel series. It's just great for her to talk about. The whole family likes to talk about it. Except for her mom, who doesn't like it when they just use movie lines all day long. She gets frustrated by it, which I can understand. But you talk with somebody who likes the same movies you do, that's exciting. You get kind of jazzed up talking about it. It's fun. But I also realize that not everybody connects with movies the same way you do. And when I talk about faith, sometimes I feel the same way. Because you realize that not everybody feels about their faith the same way that I do. Not everybody feels about faith the same way you do. All of us have different experiences. Just like we experience movies in different ways at different times with different people, we experience our faith, our Catholic faith, in different ways, at different times, with different people. And so it's hard to have a conversation for me to tell you, Mass is awesome. The way we celebrate our faith in the Mass, specifically, is an awesome gift. I would love to talk with you about that regularly, and Mondays give us that chance. But even so, I might not be able to have all the same conversations because you haven't had the same experiences I have. You haven't lived as long as I have. Your parents are different than my parents. Your family is different than my family. So you can't speak from the same language that I'm speaking because my experience has been different. But I also realize that there are opportunities to talk about our faith in new ways. The same way you can convince somebody that movie is worth them seeing. I hope that I can help you understand that it's worth taking a look at church in a different way the next time you go. Because next time you go, you may hear something there that you had never heard before. How many of you, when you go to church, wake up in the morning and think, yes, church. Ah. How many of you get excited to go to church whenever you go? Mr. Swinnerton is going to answer yes. Dave Gill is going to answer yes. I'm going to answer yes. Mrs. Fee's going to answer yes. Joe answers yes. A lot of adults are answering yes. My daughter answered yes. She's an adult, so that qualifies still. So the adults, a lot of the adults are, why are the adults excited to go to church? I want to hear some of, okay, because they're old. I am old, and so that could be part of it. I'm going to say that could be very well part of it. Why do the adults like going to church? Adults who said yes, why do you like going to church? Tell me why you like going to church. Joe.
Because I get it now. Like when I was younger, I didn't have a real deep understanding of what was going on, but as I got older and I learned like the nuances, now I appreciate it.
So you've had a chance to experience it differently over time, and you've seen kind of the pieces all coming together in a way that didn't happen when you were younger. A good answer. What other adults can answer that question? Why do you actually like going to church? Yes. The Eucharist. And that's what Dave talked about. The Eucharist, what the significance of the Eucharist is, changed his faith experience completely, right, Dave?
Yeah.
So what else makes it exciting when you come to church? I know you come to church excited. I see you there every Sunday. Why are you like that?
I love God. I mean, like, it's a place where I get to be with Jesus. I get to be with other people who care about Him. I get to offer up myself, you know, all my worries and cares and all the things I'm excited about to God. I love getting to just be in His presence, you know, to have a chance to talk to Him.
You said something there that we're going to come back to in a moment also. You said you get to give something of yourself in the celebration of the Mass. And I want to come back to that, but I'm glad you said it. Other answers from anyone who wants to share? What makes you excited to go to Mass? Let me ask the other side of the coin, for those of you who are saying, I am not interested in going to Mass. I might go because my parents go, but I'm just not interested. Why not? Why are you not excited to go to Mass on Sundays or holy days or holidays? Yes?
Too early.
Too early. That was the first answer that people said in the last session as well. So that is, I won't mention the fact that we have a 5 o'clock in the evening Mass on Saturdays and a 5 o'clock in the evening Mass on Sundays. But besides that, I can understand before 1 is kind of early. Other answers to that. Why are you not excited to go to Mass?
I get excited, but my dad always sits in the back because
Okay.
gets weird about it.
So sometimes, that's a good answer. So she said that her dad sits in the back, so it's harder to kind of get a different experience than she would like because we're so far in the back. I'm glad you're honest about that. And so it shows that sometimes your experience of church may be dependent on how your parents experience church. And I wholly understand why that matters. And I do acknowledge that when I talk to you, because I recognize that everyone's experience is different. But it does show that, yeah, parents and how they experience church affects how their kids experience church. Let me go, Adidas. Yes.
Yeah, it's because it's just like I'm just tired. Like 8 o'clock, I'm not.
Okay, so early masses can be tough, and so I can agree with you there. Yes.
I like to go to mass every once in a while, but when I don't really like to go to mass, because I get really confused at what they're saying, and then we watch it from home. I ask them, hey, what is this mean? And he's like sitting with my brother, so I can't really like get info about it.
And that was another good answer. So he said that you can get confusing in the Mass because of the words they're using or because of the way that the stories are being told or the way the ritual is being celebrated of the Mass. And so that could be very complicating if you don't really understand where it's coming from. And when you have questions, if your parents aren't ready to answer or they're busy or they just don't know, it can be tough to have those conversations. But it's good to ask because it shows them that you're interested. So don't be afraid to ask your parents those questions. I'm glad you brought that up. Anyone, let me go back to you and I'll come back to you. Yes.
So sometimes when we wake up early to go to church, I don't have any motivation to get up and go to church. I just tired.
Being tired, it really does affect your attitude in a lot of ways. And I can see that, and I'm glad you're all sharing that answer because I know it's not easy. But it's honest, so thank you for doing that. Did I see another hand up here? Yes.
I was gonna say it's hard because because of COVID, I haven't gone in like months, sort of. And when we do virtual, there's like a lot of distracting things like my cat jumping everywhere.
That is a great example also. We didn't go to the church itself for the couple of months during COVID whenever they had the doors closed. And so we had a lot of virtual Mass celebrations at home and online streaming. It is not easy in the home environment to try to participate in the Mass with the same fullness that you can in person. I acknowledge and appreciate what the church tried to do and does try to do to make it available to people who can't join in person for any number of reasons. But it's certainly not the same. It can be very difficult. You say exactly why. Yes.
My brother and sister are younger, and they get really crazy if they have to wake up early, but sometimes they'll complain about having to go, and it like kind of ruins the mood. And it's like, they don't enjoy it.
So if the people around you have a hard time going to church, it can affect the way that you see church. And I think that's a good point to end on as we look at those reflections. And so for the various reasons that we just shared here today, these last few minutes have talked about why it can be challenging to get the most out of Mass and recognize what the Mass is really all about. For those of you who are younger and those of you who are students here, recognize that Mass is something special. I can't give you a sense of emotion about it. What we can do when we have Edge together is be able to give you a context, give you a framework for understanding the parts of the Mass, like the Eucharist, like the sacraments that are part of our church, like the scriptures that we reflect on as we go through these lessons. These are all parts of the church that can help to make it a little bit more easy to understand. So when you hear these gospel stories again, they won't be brand new to you, though they might be familiar. Or when you see Deacon Rich come up to the front of the church to read from the gospel or to preach the homily, he's not just some stranger in a robe, he's Deacon Rich. When you hear a song that might be played, on a Sunday night especially, maybe it's a song you heard here at Edge. These experiences give us insight into what the Mass is all about. And so as we talk about these things, I want you to recognize that Mass has purpose and value. But you have to make sure that you're putting your heart and head in the right place to take that Mass experience in. And not just have you staring at the screen or staring at the event the same way you might be staring at a screen of a movie you're not interested in. Dave was talking about experiencing the Eucharist in a special way. And I think it's important to recognize that we can become disconnected from what the church is about very easily because we are so distracted by other things, like Netflix, or like computer games, or like pretty much anything else in the world, because we're surrounded by more distractions than anything else. Always trying to take our eyes off of what is truly important, right? At Edge, we want you to recognize that Christ should be most important, and his church is how we get to know him more fully. And so rather than being distracted by things, what I want you to try to do is we look ahead to this coming Sunday, the next opportunity that many of you will have to go to Mass. I'd rather you change from Netflix and instead try to get your eyes fixed on Christ. And so what I want to do in the next few moments is give you some ways in which you can do that. Because it's not always easy to do, but the steps you can take can actually have an effect on how you see and participate in the Mass in hopefully a new way. Take your Bibles out for one moment. And you'll see on screen the passage Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2.
Hebrews.
Hebrews is St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews. It is a New Testament book, so it's very close to the end of the Bible, just a couple books back from the end of the Bible. As you're looking for it, St. Paul was not an apostle. He was not one of the 12 apostles, but he was a very important disciple, an important follower of Christ, who helped to bring the gospel
1,350.
to many parts of the known world. We'll get the page in 1 second. We'll get the page in 1 second.
1,372.
What's the page number?
1,372.
Okay. 1,372. So St. Paul wrote many letters to the churches that he established. He did a lot of work to check in on them and make sure they were following what he was teaching and make sure that they were living the gospel in their life as a church. In his letter to the Hebrews, I'd like someone to read the first 2 verses of chapter 12. Got to be loud. Everyone can hear you.
Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us, and persevere in running the race that lies before us, while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. For the sake and joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising its shame, and has taken his seat at the right of the throne of God.
Thank you, sir. That was very well done. I want to look at this part of that verse more closely. St. Paul tells us to persevere in running the race that lies before us while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. Even in this short passage, there's a lot that excites me and shows me how passionate Paul was about the message of Jesus Christ. If you read other passages of Paul, he talks in other places about running a race. He talks about the winner's crown, earning the winner's crown for the race that he has run. He talks about wearing armor and putting on a battle. He has a lot of sports analogies in his writing because he recognizes that being a person of faith does take strength. And so what does he say here? He says, to be strong, to persevere in running that race, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus is what's essential. In a world of distractions, it can be difficult to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus because he's what matters. But Paul recognizes that we have to persevere. We have to keep trying. We have to keep going. Because he also recognizes that we are not the perfecters of our faith, right? Who is the perfecter of our faith? Who is the leader and perfecter of faith? Yes. Jesus. Jesus Christ is the perfecter of faith. I'll speak for myself. I am not perfect. Raise your hand if you're perfect. We are not perfect in any way. But Christ has given us the gift to bring us closer to perfection through the gift of his sacraments, through the gift of his Mass, the gift of his church. And if we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, it gives us purpose in the midst of battle, in the midst of struggle, in the midst of distraction. We can be closer to him every day if we are able to stay focused, stay prayerful, stay on the right path and avoid what we know is going to get us into trouble. Lose the distractions and stay close to God. Stay closer to him with every decision we make. And we're going to talk more about that as you go through your breakout groups here in a few moments. Jesus is the leader and perfecter of our faith. And he gives us the opportunity to know him more closely in the Mass. Dave talked about it last week. The Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. Every Mass and in every tabernacle, the body and blood of Christ, the very presence of Jesus Christ, his physical presence itself, is made present on earth. The Savior of the world takes the form of a host so it can be placed in our hands and we can consume it into our own bodies. None of us truly appreciate what that even means. There's no possible way we could understand or appreciate what that means without falling on our faces at every moment when that host is before us. We couldn't possibly appreciate what that actually means. Otherwise, we would never leave the church. We would be in the church at all hours of the day, recognizing that the presence of Christ is right here among us. All of us fall short of that. And Christ knows that. God knows that. That's why we have the sacrament of reconciliation to bring us closer to it and bring us back to where we need to be. But the Mass is where this happens. And what I want you to see is when you go to Mass next time, I hope it's on Sunday, and you see the priest hold the host above his hands, above his head, in his hands, in the same hands that you will be holding the host moments later. Recognize the importance of what's taking place here. No other creature can experience Christ in the way that we do. In some of our traditions, we hear that the angels almost have a sense of wonder in that we can experience Christ in a way that they can't. That's powerful to think about. We're more special than angels in that we get a chance to touch the physical presence of Christ in a way that the angels couldn't? Is that even real? It is real. That's amazing. Look at Mass in a new way when you go on Sunday. You talked about the fact that it's challenging to understand what Mass is about. It doesn't need to be that complicated. Christ is coming to you. Dave also said that you're giving something back to him. Just giving him your time and attention for that hour you're there, even if it's boring, put your heart there and say, God, I'm here for you. Those are simple things you can do to just give him your time and your presence. Simple things you can do. If anything else, I also don't want you to go to church expecting to be entertained. How many of you are bored in church? It's okay to admit that. When I was your age, I was also bored in church. But I went every Sunday because my parents said, we go every Sunday. At 8 o'clock, second row back in the second half of the church. Same place, every Sunday, same time. No excuses. If I had a sleepover at my friend's house, I had to be back at home by 7 o'clock on Sunday morning so we could all go to church at 8 o'clock. There were no excuses. I didn't understand it all the time then, but when I came to realize as I got older and lived longer like the adults here lived, you start to realize that there was purpose behind that. Because my parents wanted us to see that this matters. You don't miss out on this. I don't care if you're hanging out with your friends. Your friends will still be there, but this is what matters. So it's good to ask yourself questions. Say, am I giving it the time it deserves? Am I thinking about it when I should? Do I care about church that much? You might not right now. But God knows when He can speak to you most clearly. Maybe it's through something you're hearing tonight. Maybe it's not something you're going to hear until you get older. But know that Christ is ready for you, and He wants you to spend time with Him. And the Mass is a great place to do that. But don't go to church thinking, entertain me. That's not what it's there for. Church is there for you to step in and say, Christ, I'm here to be with you, and I'm here for whatever you want to offer me today. So that you can then use it to go out to the world and bring the world something about Christ that they didn't have before. There's simple ways to do that. 3 simple things I want you to think about here for a moment. You've been going to church now for a while. You've been Catholic for a while, most of you. And you have gone to confession at least several times probably with Edge. If you're in 6th grade, you haven't gone with Edge yet, but if you're in 7th or 8th grade, you've at least gone once or twice with us before. Many times you'll get a piece of paper with a bunch of questions on it before reconciliation, right? You know the piece of paper you might make some notes on? That's what's called an examination of conscience. It's a chance for you to reflect on your actions, your behaviors, the type of person you've been, the relationships you've had, the actions you've taken, the words you've made, how you've talked to people. Those are all ways in which you can examine how you have behaved. And it can be important for you to think about, am I really being the person that Christ wants me to be? Because chances are, I can speak for myself again, I haven't always been who Christ wants me to be. How many of you enjoy going to confession? Good. Again, that is a very good thing. I would love to hear some of your answers on that. Would anyone like to answer why they enjoy going to confession? Because the vast majority of us didn't have our hands up. Even I was kind of like, because I wasn't quite sure. Because in the moment, it's not easy. But for those of you who enjoy going to communion, going to reconciliation, what's the answer you raised? Why did you raise your hand? Dave.
It's scary going in, but when you're done, you feel really free. Like you feel totally light, and like it just your sins gone. You know, it's an amazing feeling.
Who else has that feeling after going to reconciliation? I saw a couple hands over here. I'm guessing a lot of you have had that before. It really is something that you can't explain to someone who doesn't have the sacrament of reconciliation. Dave, you came from a church that you didn't have the sacrament of reconciliation. Did you ever have that sense of emotion in your old church? Or did you only find that once you accepted the sacrament here in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, it was totally different when I got to the Catholic Church.
It's different.
Yeah.
And so I love to hear stories like Dave's, who said he came from one place and now he's here. He came from a totally different land. Still a land that knew Christ. But to be able to experience Christ in a way that is given to us in the Catholic Church is amazing. It's exciting. And we take it for granted. I included take it for granted. But we talk about it here on Mondays because it's a chance to really think about this and say, I need to give this some more thought. I got to give it the time it deserves. Examining your conscience is giving your behavior the time it deserves. Think about how you've acted in the last week, or last month, or last several months since your last confession. Have you been everything God wants you to be? Maybe, maybe not. Open up to the first letter of the Corinthians, chapter 11. Once someone has a page number, shout that out for me real quick. Towards the back of the Bible, it's a New Testament book after the Gospels, but before Hebrews. 1 COR, if you have the tab. I think the tab's... Yes.
1,283.
Oh, hold on. You didn't even have your hand up, bro. Go ahead. No, shout it out.
12,000. I don't know.
Okay, what was the number? It's okay. You had your hand up first. Grant, what's the number?
What?
What's the number?
Number 1,283.
Jeez, thank you, Grant. I do love my table. I just give him a hard time. Okay, so it's not the same thing. So-
Very different.
I am going to need someone with a loud voice and patience. You had a good one before, so thank you for doing that. Nick, got to be loud. Read this out so the whole room can hear you. Verses 28 and 29, chapter 11.
A person should examine himself, and so eat the bread and drink the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself.
What was that? That D word you were reading is discerning.
I can't read that well.
That's okay. Discerning got the last group too. Discerning is a tough word. So discerning means to recognize. So if they are discerning the body and blood of Christ, they are recognizing that the body and blood of Christ is in their presence. So read the first part of that one more time, Nicholas.
A person should examine himself, and so eat the bread and drink the cup.
So you should be examining yourself, your conscience, before partaking in the body and blood of Christ. That's the great way to start the Mass. Before you go to Mass is to say, where have I been in your presence? Where have I been away from your presence, Lord? Change my heart. You may come to the realization that you're not ready for Eucharist because you've had bad decisions or you've made bad choices and you've put yourself in a place where you've separated yourself from where God wants you to be. If you've recognized that, that's a blessing because many people live their whole lives not realizing that they've been separated from Christ. But if you recognize, I've behaved in a way that I shouldn't, that's a great opportunity. We'll have reconciliation here in the coming weeks at some point. Bring that to God. Bring that to the Father and the reconciliation opportunity that you will have when that time comes. That examination of conscience is powerful. What is fasting? If you are fasting, what is that?
You don't eat or drink for a long period of time.
So you can fast for days, weeks. Jesus fasted for 40 days in the desert. When it comes to fasting before Mass, the church says you should fast for 1 hour. So whatever hour you go to Mass, stop eating 1 hour before that. No food except water and medication if you are in need of medication for any reason. Anything else, you should hold off. Because you want your body to be physically prepared for the recognition that you're receiving the body and blood of Christ. Your body should be in a state where you're not just snacking on a donut in the car on your way into church, and then you're going to be taking Jesus into your presence in that way. Let your body get ready for what's about to take place. Dressing properly also. Many people said they didn't like waking up early. The second thing that got said earlier this afternoon was that people didn't like having to get dressed up. I don't know any people that get dressed up for much of anything anymore. I go to work, I wear my jeans on the lower half, and I do have a shirt and tie on the top half. But since we've gone to COVID, people's habits have completely changed. Most of you are wearing sweatpants or stretch pants right now? Most of you are. I think everybody in the last session had sweatpants or stretch pants on. Maybe church is worth something a little bit more than that. If you can, maybe throw in a pair of slacks or something if you can. I mean, I know that the world may not know what to do if one of you says, I'm going to get up and put a tie on and go to church. I think literally the world might stop because I don't see kids doing that anymore. I'm a grown man and I don't do it either as much as I should. Joe Radcliffe, I give him credit. He's decked out every time he's doing a reading up in the front of the church. And even outside of that, he's wearing a shirt with a collar on it, buttoned down. Like he knows what he's doing. A lot of the other adults here say, it's worth me taking the added step of doing something nice when I go to church. Have you ever gone to a wedding and worn your pajamas to a wedding?
No.
For those of you who go to dances in middle school, unless it's a themed pajama dance, I'm guessing you are probably going to wear something nicer than pajamas to a dance you're going to in school. Because it's worth the time to put something nice on. We are, look at this here. Jesus Christ is in our presence at church, but you're not going to put on a pair of pants? It just sounds so silly to even say, but the fact is that all of us get lazy. We don't recognize what's actually happening in the Mass. I am included in that. I take it for granted myself. It's okay to face that and say, maybe I should do something a little bit different. Maybe this is worth something more than my sweatpants. Face that reality. Just have some of these questions in front of you when you go to Mass next time. I hope and pray you go to Mass on Sunday.